Hi guys, so Boris Johnson, following what can only be called a defeat when it came to undermining Rishi Sunak over the Northern Ireland Protocol, the former Prime Minister is attempting now to dig himself out of a hole by blaming the EU for what happened over Brexit. Johnson was speaking at the Global Soft Power Summit for some reason, where he backpedaled on the protocol. He started out by blaming the Benn Act and then suggesting that the EU wanted to implement the protocol too strictly. Have a listen to this.
But you remember the circumstances in which we had to do that deal. Under the terms of the Benn-Burt Act, or as it was called, the so-called Surrender Act, we couldn't leave unless we agreed to the EU's terms.
No. It wasn't about agreeing to the EU's terms. It was about you're not allowed to leave without a deal. Now, you had said at the time you were fully supportive of a deal. You wanted a deal, but you wanted to use a no-deal Brexit as some sort of bargaining chip. No one actually believed that you would leave without a deal because of the damage it would do to the UK on the world stage.
And there was no doubt that we faced a particular problem in Ireland, where we were told that we faced a choice. If the UK wanted to come out of the customs union and the EU internal market, and if we wanted to keep an open border across the island of Ireland, which we emphatically did for the sake of peace on the island and the Belfast Good Friday Agreement, then we would have to make sure that we somehow checked on goods that might go from Great Britain to Northern Ireland and then on into Ireland. And that is what the protocol does.
Boris Johnson, back in 2019, met with the DUP, and he met with Unionists and business owners in Northern Ireland and told them that there would be no border in the Irish Sea. And he told business owners and business owners in particular, if anyone asks you to fill out any paperwork, tear it up, throw it in the bin, and told them that I told you to do it.
And purely to help the EU, we agreed to check on those goods entering Northern Ireland, as I say, that might go on.
No. What sort of revisionism is this? The EU wanted to do the checks and you said no. Not you offered to do it to help the EU. No, the EU said we want to put staff in these at these border points to check the goods, and the UK government said no. Trust us. We're Brexiteers. Trust us. We will do it. Once again, lying about the realities on the ground.
To Ireland. And I thought those checks would not be onerous, since there isn't actually that much stuff that falls into that category. Most of the goods stay in Northern Ireland. And it's all my fault. I'm fully accept responsibility. And
Finally, he accepts after 3 years, yeah, it was my fault. But
the protocol itself, and this is why I signed it, contains lots of reassuring phrases about how Northern Ireland remains in the customs territory of the UK and will benefit from participation in the United Kingdom's independent trade policy. The protocol notes the importance of maintaining the integral place of Northern Ireland in the United Kingdom's internal market. But beneath the paint and plaster, there was the cold steel reality of EU control. And the Commission was in charge, and not the UK. And contrary to my hopes,
So, is Boris Johnson saying that he either didn't understand the deal, or that something changed? Well, no, he's actually trying to paint a picture of him not understanding it, because he says under that paintwork, the reality was that the EU were in control. The EU are not in control. You are in control. You are the one carrying out the checks. When I say you, I mean the British government. The EU asked you, and you agreed, to carry out the checks. You didn't carry out the checks. You dragged your feet for 1.5 years. Only recently, and I covered this before, only recently the UK has started to share data with the EU. This was a requirement at the very beginning. The EU had made a request on a number of occasions, please share live data with us. And they were met with a brick wall. Excuses. That has only happened recently. Boris Johnson trying to pretend that he didn't know, or that there was something added on? I really don't know what he's trying to get at here.
They did not apply it sensibly. And we had the mad ban on sausages and potted plants and tractors and heaven knows what, and people unable to send parcels to their grandchildren. We had very serious diversion of trade.
It's not about diversion of trade. These are the requirements of the single market. Northern Ireland is part of the single market when it comes to goods. In order to protect the single market, you have to have these types of checks. Now, checks on animals have existed for, I think, 20, 30 years between Great Britain and Northern Ireland. So this was using that sort of infrastructure for a new reason. But this is something Boris Johnson knew at the time. And I'm not going to go down the road of maybe he didn't know, he didn't read the document. He had advisors telling him this. He just chose to ignore it. But Boris Johnson is about the here and now. What can I do? What can I achieve now to get over a hump, get over a problem? I'll deal with the consequences of that in the future, or maybe somebody else will have to, as we saw over the last 6 months.
As British retailers couldn't move goods like shortbread from one country, from one part of the country to the other, even if they didn't actually have stores in Ireland itself. And of course, these everyday frustrations were particularly acute for Unionist communities in Northern Ireland, who felt they were being cut off from the rest of the UK.
Now, why didn't you and your brexiteers explain it to them? Why didn't you be honest with them? Why did you go to Northern Ireland in 2019 and lie to people? Say, there will be no border, there will be no checks, there will be no paperwork. Why did you do that? Why is nobody calling him out on that? It was a lie, and Boris Johnson gets away with it.
Which I bitterly regretted and I felt was absurd, because the large majority of Northern Ireland trade is with the rest of the UK. And the problem I had was that there was nothing legally that the UK government could do, because we'd given that power away. And that is why we had the bill, to fix it.
The bill did not fix it. What he's talking about here is the Northern Ireland Protocol Bill, which would have allowed ministers in his government, or the current government, to ignore parts of the international agreement. That would have not solved the problem. That would have created a trade war with the European Union. It would not have helped businesses in Northern Ireland. It would not help trade. It would make the situation even worse. And we have to give a bit of credit to Rishi Sunak here. What he's done is he has rebuilt trust with the European Union. Ursula von der Leyen was talking about this when she delivered her speech at Windsor Castle, not Windsor, when she met with the King, and she spoke about Rishi Sunak. She said that he rebuilt trust, and this, of course, was in direct contrast with Boris Johnson and his Brexiteers, who were undermining trust with the European Union. So it has come down to, we trust the current administration, we didn't trust the last one, and that's why there was so much friction between the UK and the EU. That's why it was so difficult to get things moving. If there was no trust, the EU required had more requirements. They said, okay, well, we can't trust you to implement these things, so we have to increase the checks. We met with businesses, we trusted them because they were being honest with us, and we tried to reduce the checks. But when it came to the British government and Boris Johnson said one thing one day and did the opposite the next. And this undermined trust. But at least with Rishi Sunak, he seems to be somebody we can trust. And that's why it has come to a stage where the number of checks have been reduced, these lanes have been set up, a trusted trader scheme is being set up as well, so that goods can flow into Northern Ireland without checks. But this is all built on trust. Boris Johnson was the wrong person to be in charge. And maybe it's better for the UK, well, definitely better for the UK, that he's no longer in charge. Let me know in the comment section, guys, what you think. As always, your comments are greatly appreciated. Thanks a lot.